Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome to Etcetera on the Vibe Live. I'm your host, Kelly Barrett. So good to be back. I've sure missed you guys. I can't think of a better way than to get things rolling again than with a true Canadian legend, singer, songwriter, author, artist, host. I'm going to add humanitarian in there. The legendary Murray McLauchlan. Murray, welcome.
Hi, Kelly. Nice to be here. Thanks.
And I understand you're hanging out at the lake, so I really appreciate you taking some time off to come and hang out with us today.
Well, it's my favorite spot in the whole world. I mean, I don't mean to make Albertans uneasy or uncomfortable or jealous or anybody else in Canada, but whenever I get into the Lake District of Ontario, I just feel like I'm home.
There's nothing like it, hey? And yeah, we are slightly jealous at the moment. You know, Murray, we have so much to talk about. You know, when you're looking at an individual with a 30-year plus career, and you've got so many, amazing just adventures and projects that you're on. My understanding is you began performing in your teens, like early on, at a very young age. You started performing.
Yeah, I was going to art school when I started going to art school when I was about 14 years old. And very quickly discovered the New York School of Songwriters that were putting contemporary, meaningful lyrics to old traditional folk forms. You know, the Eric Andersons, the Phil Oakes, Bob Dylan, of course, one of the exemplars. And I got wrapped up in that and kind of steered away from visual arts and into music. And by the time I was 15 years old, I was playing weekends in a bar restaurant thing called La Rive Gauche with a slash, and then it said La Bank in case you were illiterate in La Belle.
And so I understand that you began, and I think probably you get a little more girls with music than with the art, Murray, I'm thinking too.
Well, I don't really.
That was your motivation.
I don't have a standard of comparison, quite frankly. I've always been very, very satisfied with the ones I've met, particularly the one I'm currently married to.
And speaking of that, I did not know, Murray, until this week that you are actually married to Denise Donland. I did not know that.
Yeah, we've been married for 31 years and have a son who's 29 years old. And she's a fabulous person to be married to. She keeps me honest. And, I know that should I ever misbehave, she could take me with one hand tied behind her back. Easy.
Way to go, Denise. Well, and that's a long time to be married, and that makes my heart happy to hear that. And Denise, of course, is a former much music fame, and she's no slouch either. She's a business executive, producer, author, public speaker, host, and member of the Order of Canada. And I think that makes you guys a power couple, Murray. I'm thinking.
As I always say, we clink when we hug.
Never a dull moment in your house, I'm thinking. Murray, so we were talking about your career early on, and I know you did a lot of festivals. I heard that you one of your first ones that you did was the Philadelphia Folk Festival, where you appeared alongside Jim Croce and John Prine. That must have been really exciting for a young Canadian.
It wasn't just those two. Actually, at one point, we used to have this thing where we kind of convene in somebody's hotel room, and there was alcohol involved, of course. Amount. And we'd sort of swap the latest things that we'd written. It was kind of I don't know what to call it, kind of like a tractor pull, but for songwriting. And at one point, I recollect, we were all there in the same year. It was Tom Waits, Johnny Prine, Steve Goodman, who wrote City of New Orleans, Loudon Wainwright III, who wrote Dead Skunk in the Middle of the Road,
right?
And Jim Croce, all kind of in the same room swapping songs. So that was kind of cool.
I
felt I held my own okay. I did all right.
Were you verklempt?
No, I knew most of those people pretty well, and I think it's no secret. Certainly was no secret to John, who unfortunately we lost recently,
Right.
It was no secret to Steve Goodman, or it was no secret to any of the rest of them, Loudon Wainwright in particular, that I thought they were really, really great writers. In the case of John and Loudon, I think they're two of the best songwriters that the United States has ever produced.
Right.
Maybe kind of unsung for their best work. But John, especially, was a savant. He was an amazing writer.
Right. Very. I agreed. And very. And guys that are watching, I'm joking about the verklempt thing because before the show, I told Maria I was so thrilled to meet him. I said, I'm slightly verklempt right now, and Murray very wisely replied, Kelly, verklempt is verboden. So little inside joke there. I also heard at that one Philadelphia Folk Festival. I love this. I heard that you donated half your stage time so that Joni Mitchell could have some stage time. Is that true?
It's true. It's just the wrong festival.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Stand corrected.
No worries. That's the internet for you. It is a perpetuator of disinformation.
This is true.
No, that happened at Mariposa, and actually it was Neil showed up. Neil Young. I mean, Joni Mitchell showed up. Bob Dylan showed up. Gordon Lightfoot showed up. Gordon and Bob were hanging out, and Joni wanted to sing, but at the time, the organizers of the festival were a little. They wanted to concentrate on people that were not going to make a big event out of it. I don't know how to put it. I think they didn't want famous people actually taking over the thing and bullying other people out of the way. So
gotcha.
They wouldn't create a place for Joni to perform. So yeah, I've known Joni for a while, and said, if you want to sing, come on up and sing. And I think actually Bruce Coburn also gave up some of his stage time so Neil could do some songs too. So it was kind of going around that weekend. Right.
We love that. It's so Canadian. Isn't that so Canadian? And
it sort of, we all kind of hung and knew each other. I mean, I ended up doing the Tonight's the Night tour from Boston to Berkeley with Neil. So we all kind of knew each other pretty well.
Right. Great stuff. Great. That's a great story. I love that. And Maria, and I understand that you did things slightly differently than most because you actually had a couple of very well-known songs out that had been recorded by other artists before you even had your own album out.
I was very, very fortunate. I used to hang out in the back stairs of the Riverboat Cafe before I got a chance to play there. And that was it was a hangout place because it was between the stage and the dressing room. So not only could you hear the show if the door was open without having to pay for it, and we were all dirt poor.
Right.
usually got to meet the artist who was, if you said hello or something, they'd say hello back.
For sure.
A lot of amazing people there. But a guy I knew was playing guitar for an American singer named Tom Rush. And I got a chance to meet Tom. He came up out of the club. Trevor Beach was the guy who introduced me to him. And Tom said, play me some songs. And Tom at the time was really well known for discovering songwriters. He was, I think, the first person to actually record Joni Mitchell. He was the first person to record James Taylor, also Jackson Browne, quite a number of people. So I played him a song of mine called Child Song, and he decided to cut it on his first record for Columbia Records. And as a result of that, it gave me enough impetus that I moved to New York in 1969, and I lived in New York for all of that year, signed a publishing deal with the Albert Grossman office, courtesy of Tom's kind of intro, and lived in the Albert Hotel and started doing gigs and little concerts and stuff around New York. I didn't come back to Canada until Bernie Finkelstein was starting up True North Records and asked me if I wanted to record.
And my understanding too, that's a great story. The Child Song, not only was it performed or recorded by Tom Rush, but it also was featured on the hit Netflix series This Is Us.
That is true. Yeah,
That was a great show.
Tom's version of that recording, and when I, it's probably not germane to what you're asking about, but when I saw the check from BMG Music of LA for that performance on This Is Us, thank you, Jesus. Pretty nice little treat, really.
Good for you. Thank you, baby Jesus. And then Honky Red, which also was performed by Chris Christopherson and Waylon Jennings and Bobby Newworth. That's incredible.
Yeah, lots of people have recorded that song or sung it. Dave Bromberg, who played guitar for Dylan for a while, did a record of it. But most recently, it was discovered and recorded by a big American rock and roll band called Widespread Panic, and they've not only been performing it in their stadium shows, but they also recorded the song, which is kind of cool. It's an example of the folk process that I really love, because when I wrote the song, there's a reference to an old wino who's a veteran, and he lost his leg in the Second World War in France. Well, when the Widespread Panic's bass player's dad recorded the song, which is where the Widespread Panic guy heard it, he said, "I lost my leg in Nam." And then when the rock band recorded it, that's a younger generation, they changed it to "I lost my leg in Iraq." So the song has been through three versions.
Wow. That's an incredible story too. I knew you were going to be an interesting guest, Murray. We're getting some comments here. Charlene Cecilia Dorval says, "Hello, Murray." Amen to that. I think she's talking about your big royalty check from This Is Us, I would imagine. Debbie Lynn Ray says, "Hello." So, Murray, I'd like to talk about your 18th album, Love Can't Tell Time. And I absolutely love that title, because in and of itself, that's a very profound title. Where did that come from?
Well, she's passed away, unfortunately, but I had a really dear friend named Allison Gordon. Allison was everything. She was a broadcast journalist. She was an author. She was president of PEN, the organization that helps to get writers out of jail who have been in trouble with their governments throughout the world. She has a long pedigree. She was also a bit of a curmudgeon. And Allison, well, she became the other woman in a love triangle, and she was, not the wifely person, but the scarlet woman. And of course, this was the first time in her life. She was well into her 60s, and she was absolutely tickled pink. She was delighted to finally be a scandal. She got a tattoo on an intimate part of her anatomy, as a matter of fact. It was a heart with a banner through it that said, "Your name here." That's Allison. Anyway, one day we were sitting down.
Go, Allison.
Yeah, we were talking about the fact that love isn't just something that happens to teenagers. It doesn't just happen to Romeo and Juliet type people. It can happen at any time in your life with just as much intensity and just as much passion. And so we started work on this song, and it still got one of the best opening lines that I think I've ever been part of, which was, "People in their prime can hit the sack and still be active."
Absolutely. I love that. And I think that's such a great message, because actually my grandmother got remarried at 72.
Well, I've always said, you better watch out for Mom and Pop over there in Chartwell.
That's a great message. I love that, because we're all getting older. And who said love is for the young? And I love that it's a time, Murray, where people, it doesn't seem to be the age limitation, where people are getting to a certain age. And I've discussed this with other guests too. There's still so much coming down the pipe for so many people at our age and older. And back in the day, I don't like to say back in the day, but it was kind of like once you hit 50, you were sort of putting on a cardigan and gardening, and that was kind of the end of that. And I love that today's culture really supports and loves that aspect of the second season, and there's still so much to do. Only we're stronger in our minds. We're more set, and I think we can accomplish great things as we get older. We've learned some things.
Well, I certainly think that ascribing is basically as pointless as ascribing anything else to any group. The fact of the matter is that, well, I've always really admired the work of a guy named Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book which I recommend to anyone who likes to read. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. And the idea behind it is the most important thing in life is not food, shelter, mommy, daddy, anything. The most important thing in life is that you perceive that your life has meaning, it's value. And only if people perceive that their life has meaning would they be willing to actually lay it down for a cause or for a person.
Great. I love that. I
And
absolutely.
as long as you have that attitude, you're not really, age doesn't really matter because you remain involved with your world.
That's right. And nobody can take that away from you. No birthday can take that away from you. So I love that. So Murray, I'm really curious about the song "The Luckiest Guy" off of "Love Can't Tell Time." What was I love that song, and I'm curious what the inspiration behind that was.
It's for the wife.
I kind of figured, but I didn't want to assume.
Yeah. Well, it's one should never do commercials for someone one loves, lest someone else appreciate them and swipe them away from you. But
But
it hasn't really been that much of a worry, fortunately. But no, I wrote that song for Denise. I've written a number of really quite sentimental and tender songs for her over the years.
beautiful. What a lucky lady. What a lucky lady.
I think
I,
I'm the luckier guy, to tell you the truth.
oh, and I'm sure she would agree with that. That's beautiful. I love long time love stories. They warm my heart. So Marie, I'm just curious, what does your writing process look like? Does it start, with an idea and then lyrics first, or is it a melody in your head that starts things rolling, or what does that look like for you?
Well, the simple answer to that question is yes.
Okay.
In the case of the record that I've just finished, which is called Hourglass, I actually wrote all of the what became songs on that album as poems. And I wrote the poems to get things off my chest, which had been bubbling up for quite some time. In the case of Love Can't Tell Time, the album you just mentioned, I wanted to actually create some songs that might add to the so-called American songbook and give, up and coming younger jazz singers a little something extra to work with rather than the same 50 songs that everybody always sings. When I did Hourglass, I wrote in a very abstract way. I just started writing or impressionistically whatever came out of my head without caring what it said or what it was about. And then it just kind of grew like Topsy. And when it was done, I kind of figured out what it meant. So there's no set methodology, really. Whatever kind of works, and that's the thing that keeps it fresh and that keeps it vital. Is I don't believe in imposing methodology on your creative process. Mind you, if you need to, you should be able to. You should have enough
For
notes
sure.
to be able to do that.
Right.
Uh, I think you need to really know your instrument, and you really need to know something about music and composition and how to make a compound sentence and all of that stuff. But once you know that stuff, you can play with it.
For sure. Yeah, and just a note to the viewers, all of Murray's music can be found on www.murraymclaughlin.com, which is scrolling along the bottom of the screen here. Murray, it's no secret that you are incredibly passionate about being Canadian, and proud to be Canadian, which I love. And you also have a great love for aviation. Could you tell us a little bit about your Floating Above Canada project? It was a while back.
Sure, that's a while ago. I did that flight in 1987.
Yeah.
I'm an immigrant like so many people in Canada. I came here from Scotland in 1953, but I was born in the aftermath of the Second World War, and basically people who flew airplanes and the airplanes themselves were are symbols of heroes. The Spitfire, the Lancaster, the Hurricane. So aviation was kind of in my blood, and it was enough in my blood that the first time I had any disposable income, I decided that I wanted to learn how to fly. And I found quickly that I really love flying because I love doing things that are exceptional. And I also like doing things that, well, if I had to describe aviation, I would say it's about fear management. Um,
For sure.
yeah, I
You
mean, your
can't be
first
flamed up in the air.
there isn't a pilot in the world that doesn't remember their first solo.
I'm sure. I'm
And
sure.
that's fear management writ large. That's sweat dripping off the end of your nose. That's I don't know what I'm doing and I'm going to kill myself.
Right? No pressure. There's no room for error here.
Yeah. And once the instructor steps out the door, you are well and truly on your own for the first time. But the the project that you're talking about, which was a circumnavigation of Canada in a Cessna 185 amphibious float plane, um, I wanted to make the flight. I wanted to circumnavigate Canada in a float plane, so I figured out a way to pay for it. Um, Ultimately, that was the reason that I did the show. Ultimately, and fortunately, there were some people who were willing to sell the idea and the version of it that allowed me to fly around the country. Kind of, you fly the airplane, you drop down, and oh my goodness, there's Gordon Lightfoot sitting on a rock. Fly the airplane, and oh my goodness, there's Buffy St. Marie.
Buffy St. Marie.
Fly the airplane, and oh my goodness, there's Levon Helm.
Or Edith Butler.
Yeah. So, they made it into a little kind of fantasy. But it was very popular. It played for quite a number of years, and then it played on NPR in the United States for quite a number of years after that. It was a kind of a Canada Day show for ages.
Right.
But
I love.
I like doing the flight. I had a lot of fun flying that airplane.
I bet, and it's just such a Canadian patriotic sort of thing to do. And Marie, you've actually worn a lot of hats in your 30 plus years of your career, and you were also the host of the CBC weekly radio program Swinging on a Star, which was a showcase for and a celebration of the songwriters' art in a live performance venue, and that was a top-rated music show with over 750,000 viewers every Saturday for 5 years. That's crazy.
Yeah, we were the second highest rated show other than Morningside with Peter Zosky. And that was actually only supposed to be for a year. But it kind of grew like Topsy. And we ended up doing it for 5 years. And a lot of really great writers were on that show. I mean, there's really memorable episodes that I could think of off the top of my head. Maybe unusual ones, because some people that were on the show didn't even, well, they certainly weren't known as songwriters. And, I think one of my most creative and interesting double bills was Graham Greene, not the writer, the actor, who played Kicking Bird in Dances with Wolves.
Right.
He wrote these, kind of smoky Isaac Hayes type love ballads. And so he came on the show and he sang that stuff. And the other act on the show was the Dream Warriors, which were like an urban band from Jane and Finch in Toronto,
Right.
Who were just kind of breaking it. Urban music wasn't really widespread at that point. I think, my darling wife really helped to put urban music on the mainstream map in Canada with her presence at Much Music.
Much Music, right? Yeah. I bet there were some wild stories from Much Music that were coming home every day with Denise, hey?
Yeah.
I know the story because I had Christopher Ward on the show a few weeks ago, and I heard there, that was quite the setting, quite the workplace. It sounded like it would have been just fascinating.
Well, she was dedicated enough that when our son was in the process of being born, her water broke while she was doing an intimate and interactive with the Cowboy Junkies. So she was timing her contractions on the basis of the length of their songs. So she was kind of sweating a lot, and the makeup person was going a lot. She says, "I'm in labor." And they, "Oh, you're just kidding." But
walk it off.
When I was over, it was like the security guys cut a path through the place, and we were in the car and heading for the hospital.
What a trooper.
Yeah, a trooper.
That's a great story.
The headlines in the paper next day read, "The Littlest Cowboy Junkie."
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's a great story. We were talking about how Denise was appointed to the Order of Canada. You were also received that honor in 1993. Tons and tons of accolades and awards. 2016, inducted into the Canadian Country Music Hall of Fame. 2018, you were given the Governor General's Performing Arts Award. 11 Junos. What is it like to be acknowledged for your work in that, that type of genre? Like, it's got to be amazing.
Well, I'm certainly not sniffy about it. I mean, I think that's a really wonderful thing. All of those particular things are kind of for different reasons.
Right.
The Juno Awards they're an industrial award.
For sure.
Yeah, they represent a certain thing, usually sales or commercial success.
Yeah.
Which is understandable and great. I mean, they're like the Grammys or anything else. The Order of Canada is kind of a broader spectrum. It's not just for what you may do inside your own career, but it's also for what you might do that
outside.
broadens the scope of recognition for your country, or activities that improve the life of your country in some way as well. The Governor General's Performing Arts Award for Lifetime Achievement is just that. It's like, okay, you've been around long enough and you ain't dead yet. Here you go.
So I was going to ask you.
Things were quite.
I can imagine. I was going to ask you, of all the the awards and accolades, and which one has meant the most to you and why? And I think you might have just answered that question, but I would think probably the Governor General's Award, or.
No, I mean, it's, as I said, it's wonderful to be recognized. I don't.
For sure.
It's not why I do what I do, but I appreciate.
Of course not.
Listening, and I do appreciate the fact people are listening. But I think probably my most interesting, moment would have been when Ray Natishan pinned me for the Order of Canada. It really meant a lot. It was a rough year, and it really brought me up a lot. And notwithstanding the fact that when it was time for the dinner, I was sitting next to, on one side was Flora MacDonald, who was just a great woman, and on the other side was O.B. Felt. And if that name doesn't ring a bell to anybody, he was the guy who diverted flight pay and did all kinds of machinations and made it possible for the snowbirds to exist.
Oh wow!
So, he was a really interesting guy. So it was, it was just, I mean, I felt like, what am I doing here? It was kind of nice. I really enjoyed it.
For sure. Well, you were in great company. That's for certain. Murray, can you tell me something else that one of your other projects that really, really touched home for me was the Room 217 Foundation project?
Yeah, I was asked to do a performance/lecture talk at a big meeting at the University of Toronto for medical professionals about how creativity kind of dovetailed into well-being and therapeutic applications. I'd always been interested in that kind of thing. And after the talk/performance, a person named Bev Foster came up and asked me if I'd be on the advisory board of this foundation, Room 217 Foundation. And I said, well, what does it do? And she said, well, we basically are using music in palliative care situations to make it possible for, people in the end of life not to be bombarded with stupid, exhausting comments or questions by their relatives who want to lift up the hood and fix it. Or if the families can't think of any way to say, sometimes just like having the effect of music allows them to bridge the gap. Or sometimes it gives people who are in passing peace, peaceful experience. And then also they were kind of talking about the applications of music in treatment of not treatment, I shouldn't say that, but in the alleviation of suffering in Alzheimer's and dementia, which really got my attention. So I said to Bev, I've been on a lot of boards. I know how to read a profit and loss statement. So why don't you just come on your board? She said, really? Well, sure. So I've been on that. I'm off it now because they rotate off after a while. But I was on that board for 6 years and did a regular benefit show every year in Toronto at the Glengold Theatre to raise money for Room 217. We had a lot of really good people on that show, from Jan Arden, Margaret,
Jim Cuddy, and
and Margaret Atwood actually sang. Come to think of it, she brought the house down.
I bet, yeah.
She sang Four Strong Winds, as I recollect, and then she sang. The name of the song escapes me now, but it was from her God's Garden collection, and it began. We praise the tiny, perfect mole that gardens underground, the ant, the worm, the nematode, wherever they are found. She brought the house down.
Oh, Murray, I would have been bawling my head off. I would have been sobbing in the audience. This project really, really got my attention, Murray, because I lost my mother to Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. And so when I was reading that about you, Murray, I really got to thinking about the power of music and how they say that music can somewhat restore memories in some people. And And what a powerful medium, you know, to reach out to patients, as you said, you know, at the end of life stages, you know, or there are people that are dealing with dementia, and I love that.
Yeah, I mean, there's ample evidence that the last perception to go as brain function ceases is musical memory, because it's actually stored in a different part of the brain than language or conscious memory. Sometimes it
Right.
can lead back to when people have had serious brain injury, music can lead them back therapeutically to a path where they can learn to speak again, for instance.
It's amazing.
It's a very powerful tool. And, you know, as is your experience, you know, I lost my brother to a form of dementia a year ago this past March, and my sister is now in the later stages of Alzheimer's disease as well. So it has a particular resonance for me.
Yeah, that really touched my heart, and I wish, you know, this is something, and I've been studying a lot about, you know, the effects of music on certain parts of the brain, and I do find it fascinating that music memories are stored in a completely different compartment in the brain, and you know, it's just I wish that I had known about this when my mom was sick, you know, but it's something I'm just learning. But so I love that. I love that sort of, you know, when artists use music, you know, it's not. I mean, of course, it's about album sales, of course it is. You know, but when artists use their music, you know, to just for no other reason than to better another human life, or, you know, in this case, you know, to make somebody's end stages of life that much better, it's just, to me, that's more powerful than album sales. And I love it.
For anyone who's actually interested, I recommend reading a book by Oliver Sacks, pretty famous guy. They made a movie called Awakening.
Right, right.
But the book I'd recommend people read from Oliver Sacks would be, it's called Musicophilia. Musicophilia, one word.
Right.
It's a whole list of, well, just read it. It's really fascinating, but it does deal with all of that, how music affects the brain.
I think I will get a copy of that. I'm fascinated by it. I'm absolutely. Speaking of books, you were also an author, Murray. And a while back, you released a book, a memoir called Getting Out of Here Alive. What was the inspiration for you to write your memoirs?
Well, the short version is a lady from Penguin Viking asked me out to lunch, and I, of course, never being a musician, would refuse a free lunch.
Right.
And halfway through the lunch, she said, "How would you like to write a book?" I said, "Not very much, because A, it's a lot of work, and it's way too much work for what it will earn you." And she said, "Well, you know, we kind of," and anyway, she sold me on the idea. And,
Right.
what actually finally sold me on the idea was not actually the ask from Penguin Viking. It was when I thought about it. Um, you know, my son and my daughter were born when I was, you know, not 20.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
my son was born when I was 43, and he grew up to kind of adulthood. And by that time, I was in my 50s. So he didn't really know what my backstory was, or,
Right.
you know, what I was like when I was a young buck full of piss and vinegar. And, and so I thought I'd like to put stuff down that would kind of give him some insight, first of all, into who I was, and second of all,
For sure.
into what kind of really colossally stupid things I had done and still managed to live.
Don't do this.
Well, that's a hot topic actually that my son and I just discussed, because it has to do with my favorite episode ever of Star Trek: The Next Generation. For
Oh,
all of you Trekkies out there, this is the one where Jean-Luc Picard decides that he's made a lot of mistakes and he wants to live his life. If he could, he would live his life over again and rectify all of the dumb and stupid things he's ever done. So this omnipotent being called Q goes poof, and suddenly Jean-Luc Picard is living his whole life over again, doesn't make the same stupid mistakes again, manages to alienate all his friends, and never rises above ensign.
oh, wow. Wouldn't that be nice to get a do-over, eh? I don't know if I want to, though.
At the
I don't
end
know
of
if I
the
want
episode, he is begging to have his old life back.
See what? Yeah, because I think all those mistakes that we've made, all our experiences culminate and they make us who we are today. The good, bad, and the ugly. I'll take them because all of that it makes us who we are today. So, and but I think it's interesting that you would want your son to know that part of your life.
Sure.
You know, this is who I am. This is who I was, and to leave that legacy behind for your children and for the rest of us to read, I think is lovely.
Well, it's been thought-provoking and led to some pretty good father and son Scotch swilling discussions about life. Because I cannot believe that ever not being honest with your kids is ever a good strategy.
Of course not. No. No, and they know you were young once. They know that Dad was probably a bit of a badass in his earlier days. I mean, you were in the music business, so
yeah. He also knows that I know what he's up to.
Yeah, you can't put one over on Dad when Dad's had that type of a history of a background.
Nope. That's true.
So, you know, on top of, you know, singer, songwriter, author, you're also a bit of an artist, I understand, and you've done some paintings. You're a creative guy, Murray.
As I mentioned before, my first idea of what I was going to do with my life was to be an illustrator,
Right.
Especially wildlife illustrator. I saw myself doing leaping bass and heroic pictures of deer on the cover of Field and Stream magazine. That's why I went to art school and quickly found out that there was more to it than that. But I've always viewed visual arts, music, writing, they're all different facets of the same jewel. And a lot of people who do one thing also do the other. You know, Joni's a good example. I mean, she's a very accomplished painter.
Right.
So was Tony Bennett, for that matter. Lots of people are, with the possible exception of George Bush, who was a really lousy president and a really lousy painter. Kind of doesn't always work. But I still paint, and the reason that I do it, much like the reason I liked flying, was because it's an existential experience. You know, most of us live our lives with our brain chattering at us all. So there's always a dialogue going on in there.
For sure.
What am I going to do? What did I do? Riffling through the drawers for embarrassing moments that you can replay. Blah, 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 blah. But when you're doing something that puts you right in the moment, that completely focuses your attention, it shuts that voice up.
I bet it would.
It's incredibly peaceful. So that's one of the reasons I paint. You got to look at you have to be in the moment you're doing. You have to look at what you're going to work with.
For sure. Well, I think a lot of, and I agree with you, Marie. I don't do art, but I write, and I'm into photography. I think it's really, you know, commonplace for a lot of musicians to also almost feel the need to let that creativity ooze out some other pore, you know, some other pore in their skin, whether it's through art or you know, photography or writing or. I've got a question here from Rob Melody Chamber. He says, "Hi, my name's Rob. I went to W. Ross McDonald with your daughter. I remember when you did a concert for us in the choral room of this school, and I really enjoyed meeting you. I also cover your farmer song when I do open mics."
Very nice.
Well, that's very nice. And Charlene is saying, "Love the energy." And yeah, Scott Holman says he's having a little bit of trouble hearing you, but happy to see you. Loves the energy. You know, Murray, when did you know? This is another one of my favorite questions to ask artists. When you were young and you're doing these festivals and you're writing songs and things start to clearly begin to take off, when did you know that this was going to be something big? You know, like the first time you heard a song of yours on the radio, what was that like? Where were you? Do you remember where you were the first time you heard a song of yours on the radio?
I think the first time that I heard anything on the radio was probably the first album I ever did, because FM radio was very new at that point, and it was largely inhabited by dope smoking, you know, hippie DJs that just sort of played whole sides of records if they wanted to. There wasn't really any formatting. All the big broadcasting companies had bought these frequencies, and they really didn't know what to do with them, because anybody with any sense knew all the money was an AM radio. So they bought the frequencies and then kind of forgot about them until a while later. So, you know, guys like me or Bruce Coburn, you know, if the DJ liked the record, he'd play the whole side of it, right back to back with a Rolling Stones record or a Jethro Tull record or something.
Nice.
And the result was that young people didn't really know. It wasn't like, oh, this is Canadian, this is British, this is this. They just played it, so there was never a silo.
Right.
So we did college concerts pretty quickly. But I mean, the first time I ever thought that, okay, this is what I'm going to do, I was still in art school. And I went, and when I heard these really contemporary lyrics being, molded into these, traditional forms that became really powerful songs. And it was also coupled with the civil rights movement, which I've also felt very strongly about as enfolded into the whole human rights movement, because it's not just civil rights, it's human rights.
Right.
I got wrapped up in that, and my brain just went, this is what I want to do. I think I can make some difference in my world if I do this.
Absolutely. And I think musicians just know. I think we just know I knew when I was 6, and other people were playing with dolls and I was singing into a hairbrush in the mirror. I think most musicians that I'll ever speak to will say they knew from a very young age. Was it like that for you? Like, did you, even before you were a teen, when you were young, did you have that kind of that feeling that this is what you would want to do from the get-go? Because I think you're born into it. I really believe that.
Well, I liked playing music. I mean, my father bought a Hammond chord organ, and at about 7 years old, I figured out how to play La Paloma on it, and I thought I was doing stuff. But, I think one of the big influences was I had a fantastic older brother, my brother Calvin, and he brought home all kinds of music, which I absorbed. He brought home Johnny Cash's first album on Sun Records that had all those great songs on it, like I Walk the Line, Folsom Prison Blues, and all those
great stuff. Yeah.
He brought home Ray Charles. He brought home Library of Congress recordings of like Woody Guthrie. He brought home Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee records. He brought home, you name it. Not just folk music, but R&B, jazz, really bossa nova records, Stan Getz and Charlie Bird, all these popular things at the time. And I just
very well-rounded. He had a very well-rounded taste, your brother.
Yeah, he was an advertising guy. He was kind of like the original Don Draper, I think, without some of the excesses. He profoundly influenced me, and also his preferred listening when we shared a room, and at night there was a regular radio show called the Randy Ferris Show, and it was a music show, and this guy would spin records. The theme song was Joe and Eddie singing "There's a Meeting Here Tonight," but that was the first place I ever heard a Bob Dylan song. For instance, one night he played "Don't Think Twice, It's All Right" from the Freewheelin' album, and that was a sound. I just went, "Whoa, that's amazing!
Yeah.
That's an amazing sound." But he played like this really, really rich amount of really diverse music, and not just contemporary civil rightsy music, but also really great traditional stuff as well, which I still love. I mean, I love all that music. Irish traditional folk songs, British traditional folk songs. Some of them are really, really pretty meaty in terms of their content.
They are, and they're timeless.
Yeah, I mean, they're about jealousy and murder and intrigue. Just the normal stuff that people live with.
Everyday stuff that never will go anywhere. Timeless.
One of my favorite songs he used to play was this. It was called, I think, "The Flora, the Lily of the West." It's a song of betrayal, where this false-hearted woman is found with the singer's rival, on the hollow, and she's laughing about him, and then he kills the guy. And finally, he's basically, going to hang from a tree, and yet at the end of the thing, he still loves her.
As you do, I guess.
Well, I love my faithless Flora, the lily of the West. All those songs are full of stuff that happens every day, still today. Betrayal and murder and blood.
Right. broken-hearted, treachery.
Yeah.
So, Murray, what's next for you? What can we look forward to from you next?
Well, I could give you a very simple answer to that, and I'm not trying to be glib, but my goal and the thing I want to do next is get better at what I do. It's a constant evolution for me.
Yeah.
And
Friends.
I hit a pretty good dinger with this record Hourglass that I just put out. A lot of people are talking about it, and they're talking about it all over the world, which is very satisfying to me.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And
Congratulations, by the way.
it's about stuff that's that's important to me. So I think I think I think I'd like to just continue on that path of trying to get better and figuring out better and better ways to communicate complex ideas with people in a way that they'll accept.
Right. Right. And Murray, you're quoted as saying, while the world gets noisier, I just keep getting quieter. I love that. I absolutely, because I feel that too, Murray. I absolutely do feel that. And what do you think that mentality is attributed to? Like that notion is attributed to?
Well, there is a phenomenon afoot, and it's growing, that I call, with respect to your sensitivities, I'll just call it a-hole culture. And it's noisy,
Yeah.
and it's uncaring, and it's assertive, and there's a million faces of it. I really think that if you really want to get people's attention in a room, whisper,
Good point.
because they got to shut up to hear what you have to say.
Very good point.
And I don't really enjoy. I would much rather listen to Sweet Bergman-esque by Claude Debussy than any kind of rock.
Right. Right.
um, there are certain genres of music that I get that people like them, but I don't, and I don't like being overwhelmed by a lot of noise.
It just
Urban life has enough of that.
absolutely. I would agree 100%. I don't know, for me as I get older, I used to really thrive on the drama, and like being on the road and all the crazy. And as I get older, I find, and that's why I related so much to that quote when I read it. And I think it's so eloquent and it's so true. It's just, as you get older, it's just the chaos becomes, it's just not something you want to know, the drama and the noise and I certainly do appreciate the quieter moments. And so I really related to that statement. I think, again, very profound. And so, Murray, best moment of your life or a highlight of your life that you would want to share with the viewers?
Well, when I left home, I was still 17 years old, and I left because my father and I weren't getting along very well.
Right.
And that lasted from his point of view for quite some time, to the point where all through my early getting up and going, clubs, through college concerts and stuff, he wouldn't come to see me play. And he became frail, and as he was getting older, he finally decided, well, I think he was worried that I was going to amount to nothing, or in the Scottish vernacular, I was going to be a bum. So the occasion of the first concert I ever did at Massey Hall in Toronto was the occasion that I brought my father and mother down from their apartment in a limousine in the front row. And my father had never heard me do my thing before, so he was hearing me do my thing in a hall that had 3,000 people in it. And I got a chance to sing him Child Song, which is a song that I'd expressed and written things to him. So it was a tough get, but it was a big moment for me to be able to do that for my father. And he didn't live long after that, but I think as a result maybe of that night and other things, there were a lot of fences mended, and we sorted it all out before he died.
You made your peace, and possibly through music, and That's a beautiful story, and thank God that happened. You know, thank God your dad was able to see that you apparently did not turn out to be a bum.
The jury may still be out on that. We'll
Yeah, you did a hide for yourself, Murray. Oh, you know, one of the best moments of my week has definitely just been chatting with you today. You're delightful, and you are welcome to come back here anytime. Guys that are watching, don't forget www.murraymclaughlin.com. You can go check out Murray's music there. You know, Murray, thank you for being a part of my Canadian Icon series. I honestly, I can't think of anybody more worthy of that title than yourself. And you know, you are a true Canadian legend. We're proud that you're Canadian. We're proud to call you ours. And I really, really thank you so much for being here today.
Well, I love this modern age. You know, I'm being streamed so much they can call me a river.
It's awesome, isn't it? It's awesome. I love it, especially during the COVID. You know, it allowed me to sort of keep my viewers in touch with their favorite artists. And yeah, technology is a beautiful thing. So once again, thank you for taking time out of your time at the lake. We're jealous.
No problem. It's nice talking to you, Kelly, and good luck to all your listeners. Keep the pointy end forward and the tail up, as we say in the aviation community.
Right on. Thank you so much, Murray. You take care.
Okay. Bye-bye now.
Okay. Bye-bye.